Welcome in all Division II baseball fans here on divii.com, here on at divii on X, of course, same on Instagram, as well as our podcast platforms as well. However you're watching, we know it's probably with great anticipation. Maybe you already know our All-American teams that we posted to social media, or maybe you're going to learn about them for the first time today. But alongside Robert Fry, I'm Will Connerly. We're happy to present them to you today. And along with just unveiling the teams, we'll first explain the criteria for how we pick the teams briefly. I mean, it's All-Americans, pretty self-explanatory. But then also we will talk a little bit about the teams, primarily focusing on the first team. But Robert, without further ado, welcoming you into the program. Obviously, All-American time. It gets and creates some buzz around Division II baseball, doesn't it?
Absolutely, it does, Will. And I mean, it's really hard to pick these teams. We went back and forth on so many different positions, but we do want to talk about the criteria because you'll see some names that maybe were familiar in D2 baseball in 2023, or some names who were powerhouses in Division One who ran under Division One eligibility. So the criteria is simple as this: for the preseason All-American list, we're only looking at players who played in Division II baseball in 2024, a season ago. However, that doesn't mean that those players who are transferring in or transferring back won't become All-Americans by the end of the season. There's a few players on teams that are coming back, or maybe when it was at one Division II, played Division One last year, and now is back at another Division II as well. And we'll make note of them throughout this program for some of them. And I mean, this is really exciting to kind of talk about it. And we're really excited to kind of bring you these preseason All-American lists and talk a little bit about, why we picked them, what their stats were, so on and so forth. We'll do that for the first team, and then we'll list off the second and third team for you. And for our valued Patreon subscribers, if you want to see the full list of submissions, go ahead and subscribe to our Patreon, patreon.com/DIVII baseball, to be able to see that full submission list. Help support us, help us continue to provide awesome content like this for you. So without further ado, Will, let's get started with unveiling our first team, All-Americans.
Yes, first team preseason All-Americans being unveiled right now, and you just take a gander real quickly. And I think obviously we're going to go through each guy briefly, but just off the top, when I look at this, Robert, and when we were putting this together, my mind started really toward the bottom of the screen. I thought that some of the frontline starting pitching that is back in Division II baseball, it was probably the most difficult thing to pick, not to mention, which this is a song for another time, and last I'll mention it, is obviously so many good pitchers that weren't eligible but are expected to be really good this year as well because they didn't play Division II baseball last year. Had to play D2 baseball last year. That was our criteria. That's what we rocked with. But again, like you mentioned, Robert, you can see our full list on our Patreon. But here, Robert, my mind jumped at the pitching. I mean, Cole Gaiman and Connor Wolf, two of the better arms in the MIAA, two of the best arms, of course. And then Skylar Gonzalez returning as the pitcher of the year. Jake Covey, Gage Gillott, man. I mean, out of the PSAC, there's so many good arms. I thought this was really fun to watch. So I just wanted to say that first off as we can go through some of the guys. But before we do that, anything really jump out at you with this first team?
I mean, the biggest thing that jumps out to me is, the amount of talent on this page here. This is the best and brightest amount of players that, the opportunity presents for all of these players. And you can kind of see, it's all everywhere across the country. You can go all the way to the Northeast, you can go to the South, you go to the West. You got plenty of names all across the country. So, we'll go at the top, mention the name, their school, some stats from 2024, and just go back and forth. So we'll start with Adam Paniagua, catcher out of Regis. Big bat for Pat Jolly and his crew for the Rangers. He only had 173 plate appearances last year due to injury, but here's his slash line. He hit 427 with an OBP of 566 and slugged 924 with an OPS of 1490. Very impressive there. 10 doubles, 17 home runs, 60 driven in. A force to be reckoned with. We fully expect that this player with a full season for Paniagua can be amongst the top of Division II baseball players in the country.
Yeah, it was really it just was so tough because last year when he got hurt, Regis, I mean, they put together a great season. And just to make it a little bit about the team because of the individual, right? He was putting together a historic season and then he got hurt. And when we ultimately tried to decide where we were going to put him, it was interesting because do you discredit someone who maybe had less plate appearances than other candidates? And my thought process was like, as important as it is to be durable, I think that it was just, I mean, something where he put this team on the map and he put this team toward the top of the RMAC. Like he was carrying this offense for a team that won 32 ball games and had such a tough schedule to start the year. I mean, they were playing Westmont, they were playing Pitt State early on, and he was crushing the baseball. I know they split against Augustana last year, and a lot of that is because of what Paniagua did. So he certainly is coming into this year with huge expectations after he had pretty much the best OPS in the country last year. It felt like, I mean, it was on, what was it, 1,400 or something crazy? I mean,
1,490.
Gosh, so he's pretty. His combination of power and getting on base is as good as it gets, and to do it at a premium position like that. I mean, I know he's really excited to get back on the field this year, and a big year in store for Regis, who's going to compete in the RMAC. I know they were picked second, right behind Mesa as always, so it's going to be fun to see.
Absolutely. Speaking of fun to see, we go to our first baseman, Mike Hubert, who's, experiencing some new heights here, did all of his work with West Virginia State of the MEC. Now he transfers to a team that went to Cary last year. Lost some power, but needed some thump in that lineup, and Steve Klein was able to get Mike Hubert from West Virginia State, a man over 212 plate appearances, hit 400, 528 OBP, 830 slugging with an OPS of 1358, 17 doubles, 18 home runs, 62 driven in. He walked 43 times, struck out just 27 times. A power bat for a conference that, power comes at a premium there, with the amount of quality pitching that's in the PSAC. So Mike Huber, a preseason first-team All-American.
Oh, yeah. And this was like, because when we looked at the transfer tracker and the transfers, this was one that kind of flew under the radar for some people around the country. But this may be one of the most impactful transfers in the entire country. You get a preseason first-team All-American and a guy who hit above 400, like you mentioned last year. And you get to do that for someone who just elevated his play toward the end of the season last year. He really went on a tear toward the end of the year, and I think that that's going to really pay well for a team that does return some key pieces. They're top 10 of the country. They go to Cary last year, and expect him to make a really big impact because he had some huge games. Obviously, that game against Fairmont State at the end of last year when he had 7 runs driven in. So it's going to be fun to see what he's going to be able to do, and really high on Hubert making the transfer over. Started at Cleveland Community College, then West Virginia State, and now here with IUP looking to do some really big things as a senior.
Yeah, every opportunity they can get to advance further, maybe become one of those final teams in the World Series, every bit helps. So having Mike Huber for Steve Klein and crew, big help as he's a preseason first-team All-American. Now we go for the next couple of people in the Midwest, and we'll start in the NSIC with Concordia St. Paul's Bennett McCallow. Ended the season as a first-team All-American, is now a preseason All-American. 424, 5'11", 696. He hit 424. OPS of 1207. He had 18 doubles, 2 triples, 10 home runs, 53 driven in, 25 walks, 32 strikeouts, stole a couple of bags. But McCullough becomes a part of this first team for this Concordia University St. Paul team, who kind of flew a little bit under the radar a season ago. But we'll see how they perform in the NSIC.
We will. And speaking of the NSIC, one thing that stood out to me as well when we were doing this is the NSIC's middle infield and just infield in general is as strong as any conference in the country right now. McCullough comes in last year from North Iowa Community College, and first year in the NSIC, wasn't a known commodity in the league. He's the newcomer of the year in the conference, third most hits in a single season. I mean, he was a hit machine. And he's expected to have a really big senior season in his second year with the team. I'm going to be interested to see how much he gets pitched to this year, because when you have 81 hits in 51 games and you can slug at the clip he did from his position, it's going to be really interesting to see what type of protection he has around him and if he can replicate some of those historic numbers. But certainly we're expecting him to do that. But yeah, the middle infield in the NSIC is looking really, really strong, and Bennett McCullough certainly a big reason why. Absolutely.
And speaking of big reason why a program like Lewis can compete in the GLBC is their third baseman in their preseason first team All-American, Mikey Kosen, guy who hit 399 a year ago, 494, 766 slugging, and OPS of 1260, 19 doubles, 16 home runs, 61 driven in, 34 walks, 34 strikeouts. He went 6 for 6 stolen bases in a position that, Will, you and I felt, aside from maybe outfield, was the deepest in terms of trying to boil it down to just 3 candidates. So many talented players on this list. But, man, it was really hard, but we felt like we were comfortable with a guy like Mikey Kosen, who hit nearly 400 and had the power numbers to boot.
He did, and coming from UNC Pembroke to then Lewis, and where he hit 253 at UNC Pembroke, was Triton College before that. Kind of bounced at a few places, and he was really good at Triton College. Didn't have a great year at UNC Pembroke, but then he puts together just a fantastic season. I know, Robert, you saw him play in person, and this guy, as much as you just talked about double-digit doubles, double-digit home runs, drives and runs, scores, he had a 987 fielding percentage. He was one of the best defenders in the country at his position as well, and I know you got to see him flash the leather a couple times, and he really performed well against some big teams. Had a couple home run game against 2-time World Series participant in Indy toward the end of last season as well. So certainly a guy that, yes, third base was loaded with some really good talent, but we're thinking that Kosen can certainly do some really big things, an experienced guy within this conference. And I think that it's going to be fun to see how he can continue to do things on both sides of the ball at such a high level.
At such a high level. And speaking at such a high level, a guy who had just performed at such a high level for Augustana, and that's Jack Hines, who of returners, or excuse me, not of returners, but who hit 445, an OBP of 485, 852 slugging, OPS of 1337. So a 445 batting average really speaks a lot for this guy. Leader of this team now for Augustana as they continue to try to run the NSIC. 10 doubles, 6 triples, 21 home runs, 89 driven in that 21 home run figure, tied with Peyton McCart for the most amongst returners. A guy who also stole 17 bags last season for Augustana. So we'll see. You know, this is definitely a guy on our list, on our radar, who we'll probably expect to see much of the same from last year.
Yes, 100%. And it's interesting because Tim Huber's bunch, I mean, known for a dozen shutouts on the mound. They were so good, but they have one of the best players in the country, and that's Jack Hines. And he's on the short list of guys that you could consider to be a player of the year type coming into this season. 1,300 OPS, 89 runs driven in it, and he broke a program record with 21 homers from the shortstop position that he played extremely well also. He is a reason why Augustana has been so good over the last 3 years, and he is really helping this team just continue on what is becoming a powerhouse for the Vikings. And Tim Huber's doing a good job. He actually gathered some more community college transfers this year that had some pretty outstanding numbers from other places, and hopefully he can get that same production like he got with Jack Hines, who was the NSIC Player of the Year and Tournament MVP. He performed extremely well in the postseason as well. So he is a guy that it was kind of, we didn't know if he was coming back, because just looking at it, he played a couple years at McHenry, and then he's going into his 4th season here at Augustana. But with all the eligibility being there for Jack Hines, it is certainly a positive for Augustana, but definitely a negative for anyone that has to play him within the NSIC and Central region.
Absolutely, definitely a negative. As now we go to our outfielder, and we'll start again. These outfielders are in no particular order. They're in actually alphabetical by last name in terms of order. So don't think that there's rankings within that. It's just alphabetical by last name. We have 5 on this list. Colby Felix starts us off. Guy only had 151 plate appearances, played in 35 games, but hit .414, slugged .931, had an OPS of .1467, 9 doubles, 3 triples, 15 home runs, 43 driven in, 21 walks to 21 strikeouts, 7 for 7 on stolen bases. Guy who had limited action, but really turned it on late, got opportunities. I believe it was due to injury, but either way, a guy you definitely should be looking out for here for Colorado Mesa and Chris Hanks for that program.
Absolutely. I mean, it was kind of interesting because Colorado Mesa had a couple guys last year. If you just look at some of their percentages, the slugging, the on base, you're like, oh my goodness. But then some of the plate appearances went down. Colorado Mesa went through a lot of injuries last year with some key guys that were producing, but across 35 games to hit .414 and slug like 900, like he was doing some crazy things. And in 62 at-bats, he hit .339 the year before. So limited production, or at least opportunity in that season. So he's somebody who, all in all, in his career, he's slugging above 800 through 178 at-bats, and hoping that he can get that and some coming here this season, because he obviously plays his position extremely well, but he is one of the most difficult guys to get out. He's an on-base plus slugging machine, and that's exactly what you need in the RMAC. You need to come with bats every weekend, and he certainly provides a lot of that for Colorado Mesa.
Certainly does, providing a lot of that. 21 walks to 29 strikeouts, so shows a good eye at the plate. Another guy that shows a good eye at the plate is our next preseason first-team All-American selection, Evan Gilbert from William Jewell. Guy had 247 plate appearances, hit .342, .443, .728 slugging, an OPS of nearly 1,200, 16 doubles, 20 home runs, 88 driven in. He had 29 walks to 46 strikeouts, 13 of 14 stolen bases, but a guy who really turned it on late as well. If you saw our 100-day countdown, you saw that in an 11-game stretch, he had 10 games with 2 or more driven in. So really impressive there, and a guy that definitely will carry the cog for William Jewell. I know the other weapons around him are gone in terms of graduated, but we'll see how Mike Stockton retooled that program to be able to have bats around Evan Gilbert to repeat the season that he had a year ago.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see, because Evan Gilbert, he performed at a really high level. He helped this William Jewell team make some noise. He helped them be super competitive, and he helped them. But it's interesting because, 20 bombs, he was great. His counterparts, like you just mentioned, Alex Epp, their leadoff guy, Jake Wilcox, who hit second, Evan Gilbert hit third in that Cardinal order. So he was batting pretty much every time with guys on base and guys in scoring position. So it makes sense that he nearly led the country in runs driven in. So it's going to be interesting to see if he still has those opportunities with some new faces likely toward the top of the order. But Evan Gilbert was really, really impressive last year. I mean, they had a great offense with those three guys at the top of the order, but we'll see how he can try to replicate that. Hitting 342 is nothing to scoff at, but to realize that that was the third best mark on the team shows that, yeah, they did lose some big production, but he's definitely a guy who had some big days last year. Like you mentioned, a 13 for 20 week that he had. He can really get hot and do it in a hurry. And obviously, he's a big guy to watch within the Great Lakes Valley Conference.
Absolutely. And another guy that, unlike Gilbert, actually has a little bit of protection around him from last year, and that's Peyton McHarg at Washburn. The guy I'm referring to is Cash J as well, but McHarg, 354, 473, 743 slugging, an OPS of 1216, 17 doubles, 21 home runs, again tied with Hines for the most amongst returners, 67 driven in. He walked 35 times, struck out 42 times. He also had a couple stolen bases, but a guy that will provide a lot of power for the Ichabods as they look to improve upon their season. You know, their probably biggest win from last year was, again, beating Central Missouri in the MIAA tournament. So we'll see if they can replicate that and possibly, win the MIAA tournament, but still a long way to go. But it also helps that you have a guy like Peyton McHarg in your lineup.
Absolutely. I mean, when you can get 20-plus home runs back, he had so much power. I mean, this Washburn team overall, they really had so much power last year. It kind of got overshadowed because another team within their conference had a historic number of home runs, but they were one of the best home run hitting teams in the nation as well last season. And Peyton McHarg was a big reason why, with 21 home runs, when you can get an All-American back on your team, I mean, it's a really good thing. And he also hits for average, of course. I mean, 354 and 1,200 OPS. I mean, he had 11 games with 3 or more hits. So starting his career at Kansas City Community College and, hitting 293 his first year, and the team obviously is a powerhouse, hit about 300 the next year. He comes out and he ends up transferring to Washburn nearby and ends up having a historic season. So it's with certainty that he's a guy that we're selecting to be a preseason All-American with all the pop that he has in that bat.
And then as we now transition to the final two outfielders, these are two guys that were number 2 and number 1, respectively, in our D2 Baseball Freshman of the Year voting a season ago. Both of these guys had such impressive seasons, and it was hard to leave one off as Freshman of the Year. But number 2 in Freshman of the Year voting was Camden Tanner, guy who hit 421 for Arkansas Monticello, a team that is pretty high up there, ranked 18th to start the season. 516 OBP, 682 slugging, an OPS of nearly 1,200. Again, as a freshman in Division II baseball, 17 doubles, 13 home runs, 49 driven in. He walked 26 times and just struck out 15 times, over 261 plate appearances. Relatively impressive. 8 stolen bases. Really, really impressive. Plus the amount of weapons around him in that lineup as well makes it could be a very historic season for John Harvey and co. for the Boll Weevils.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the Boll Weevils, obviously, super regional run, really, really strong team. Had a ton of guys around them last year. Camden Tanner, though, burst on the scene, a kid from North Little Rock, Arkansas, first year with the team, and he puts up crazy numbers, and it's a reason why he was one of the best freshmen in the entire country last year. And the freshman of the year within the tough GAC, and a reason why Arkansas Monticello really is a team that we're really high on coming into this year if you saw our top 25 rankings, because they get a lot of guys back. They get some back-end bullpen guys. They get multiple guys as well on the mound. And then, of course, Camden Tanner, who does have some of that protection around him back as well. But it's going to be interesting because his father, Eddie Tanner, played 12 years of professional baseball. Camden Tanner's heading in that direction. He was so good, bat from the left side, power speed combination. And I think that he certainly has a chance to have a long professional career as well if he can continue to replicate what he did a year ago.
Absolutely. And speaking of replicating what they did a year ago, but at a different school now, is Mackenzie Wainwright, who put up a 449, 532, 871 slash line hit, 449 and OPS of 1,403, 12 home runs, 12 doubles, 16 home runs, 63 driven in. 33 walks and struck out just 17 times. And he also added 18 stolen bases at Salem and Independent. But now he transfers to Lenore Ryan and Adam Skonecki, the first-year head coach. And he'll definitely be a big key cog for this program, a team that will be competing in the SAC, and definitely helps to have a guy like this patrolling out there in center field with that power speed combo.
Absolutely. I mean, we had the chance to talk with him last year after his 10 RBI game against Notre Dame. And I mean, when you hit 450 in a season, we're just thinking, man, this guy is so good. And if you don't know about his journey, he's obviously been a guy that's been very coveted most of his career. Obviously was selected pretty high in the Major League Baseball draft a handful of years back. But as a freshman, 6'2", 220, big physical presence. This was a massive get for Lenore Ryan, and I think a reason why they could make more noise than maybe some people are expecting to this year. Mackenzie Wainwright is going to be a huge reason why. They got actually a couple of really big transfers into their program. Mackenzie Wainwright, perhaps the biggest one, and it's going to be really fun to see how that talent can translate from Salem to now having an opportunity to do it in a tougher schedule and tougher league with Lenore Ryan. Of course, a league just in general, but you know what I mean. Tougher schedule Lenore Ryan will play than Salem. Either way, when you hit 450 and you get inserted into a program, best freshman in the country a year ago, it shows that the outfield position looks pretty bright for years to come when you have two sophomores on the first team preseason All-American with Mackenzie Wainwright and Camden Tanner.
Absolutely. And, within that Southeast region now that Mackenzie Wainwright's in it, we've got to talk about another player who's our first team DH selection, and a guy who was on a team that won 38 ball games but did not see any action in the regional, and that's Landers Connor Droz with 313, 468, 731, and OPS of almost 1,200, 12 doubles, 20 home runs, 60 driven in. He walked 44 times, did strike out 58 times, but he was also a perfect 13 for 13 on the bases, and just really an impactful piece in this lineup, as Lander definitely looks like a team that should be making a regional run here in 2025.
100%. And this is one of the most experienced bats in all of Division II baseball. I mean, he burst on the scene in 22, Peach Belt Conference Freshman of the Year, all-conference team, first team selection in 2023. And, of course, you parlayed that into a great 2024 season. I mean, he's come in his career. He's hit 38 home runs. He's had over 30 doubles, and he's a .322 career hitter across 126 starts. So Lander certainly has a big bat back and perhaps the best player at the plate in the entire conference. It's going to be fun to see how Lander can come into this year with perhaps vengeance on their mind. They certainly felt like they were snubbed a year ago with how well they played, how they dominated their conference, but couldn't crack that tough 7-team regional with a couple of bids taken away from other squads within the league, or within the region. So we'll see what he can do, but he's obviously a guy when 47% of the time he's gotten on base in his career, he's done a lot of really, really good things at the plate. And that 20 home run season a year ago, it's going to be interesting to see how much opportunity he has to showcase the power this season.
And speaking of showcase power, we go back to the RMAC, and we go to MSU Denver's Jesse Velders as our first team utility selection, a guy who played a little bit of outfield and third base last year, guy who in over 196 plate appearances hit 460, 562 OVP, and slugged 860 with an OPS over 1,400, 22 doubles, 4 triples, 10 RBI, as he also had 22 walks and 13 strikeouts, and was 11 and 12 on stolen base attempts. A guy who definitely expected to be amongst the top players in the RMAC coming into 2025.
He's a huge reason why MSU Denver a couple years ago, I mean, really, when you look at what this team's done over the last decade, they've been one of the best offenses in the country, all in all, slugging on base percentage, run production, home runs. And he comes in last year. He's an All-American. You have to be when you hit 460 and have the OPS numbers that you just talked about. And he came in from Diablo Valley College. He was a couple-time all-conference guy there, hit above 400 as well. And he comes into MSU Denver and he has no drop off in his performance, and it's going to be fun to see what he could do. He's a really cool guy to talk with, and this team's had some really, really big gets, and I think that he's a guy with his performance. We'd expect to maybe have a chat with Jesse Velders a time or two this season with all the highlights he's expected to make for MSU Denver.
Absolutely a key piece for Ryan Strain and company for that MSU Denver team as they look to make a run and be a part of that regional. Again, that very tough regional with Lone Star and RMAC in the South Central. But if you have Jesse Velders, you got a chance with MSU Denvers. Now we go to the starting pitching. And again, this will be in alphabetical order by last name. Jake Covey starts us off, Concordia University Irvine. The redshirt senior who went 7-2 last year with a 1.94 ERA and a whip just above 1 at 1.009. 74 in the third innings. He struck out 89 batters, just walked 18. A key piece for this Pac West team in the Pac West. Definitely a team that made it all the way to the Pac West finals against Point Loma. They were in the driver's seat. All they had to do was one game. Unfortunately, they lost. But it also helps. You got a chance when you have a guy like Jake Covey taking the ball every game one of the series.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the best pitchers in the Pac West really over the last couple of years, a Costa Mesa, California native, and from Orange Coast College to now playing at Concordia. I mean, he has brought a lot of really good stuff to the table. He can strike guys out at such a high level. He's had so many double-digit strikeout games in his career. He's a bulldog for this team, and he's a reason why this Concordia team is going to be really tough to beat within the Pac West on any given Friday night because they have one of the best pitchers in the country at their disposal.
They sure do. And speaking of one of the best pitchers in the country at their disposal in a conference where offense was very abundant, and that's Cole Gaiman from Missouri Southern. He returns with an 11-2 record from a season ago, a 2.25 ERA, a whip of 1.05. Over 100 innings, he struck out 90, walked 39, and he was just a crucial piece for this program that won the MIAA tournament a season ago.
Yeah, I mean, 11 wins, that's tied for most in Missouri Southern baseball history last year, and that's a really storied program. He performed well in the tournament, was on the all-tournament team. I mean, and he was twice now all-MIAA selection, third team in 2023, first team, of course, last year, along with being an All-American for us. And I think that it's going to be fun because he had some big performances in the MIAA last year, 10 strikeouts against Pitt State. He was obviously able to shut down some really big teams. And coming into this season, he has 21 career wins, had a 5.7 ERA, went 5-2 in 23, but just exploded last year, throwing 100 innings, getting 11 wins, and having such a minuscule ERA. The thing that also stood out to me is he never allowed hits, Robert. I mean, when guys are hitting below the Mendoza line against this guy, it showed how tough he was to pick up on the hill. And it's going to be really exciting to see how he can slow down some of these high-powered offenses because he was pretty much good for going 7 innings every game. He was a bulldog, a workhorse, and obviously strikes a ton of guys out and never allows hits. And it's why he's one of the toughest guys to crack in the entire nation. And a big reason why, of course, he's an All-American for us.
Absolutely. Just 66 hits allowed in 100 innings. So that really speaks to the amount of quality of pitching that Cole Gaiman provides. And now we go to the PSAC conference, and surprisingly, a pitcher that's not a part of one of the 5 teams that we rank, and that's Gage Gillott from Slippery Rock. But a guy who more than deserves it, 7-3 over 12 starts last year, a 2.44 ERA, a whip just over 1 at 1.005. 56 hits allowed in 73 2/3 innings, 70 strikeouts and 18 walks. And Will, I know you'll speak on it, but a guy who could also hit with the bat as well.
Yeah, I mean, might as well speak on it. When you start 12 times on the mound, but also 34 times as a position player, primarily in left field, I mean, it shows that he's a versatile guy, but he was the PSAC West Pitcher of the Year last season, first team All-Conference, of course, but he was a second team All-Conference outfielder as well. So going 7-3, impressive. But for me, the 211 opponent batting average against, pretty nasty. 70 strikeouts and just 18 walks shows that he fills up the zone and does it with some really good stuff. He had 6 complete games and 4 shutouts a year ago, not to mention hitting 341 at the plate. Obviously, we're just focused on his pitching right now, but he provides a lot for Slippery Rock. And I think that this is going to be interesting to see how he can continue to play so well on both sides of the ball here this season.
Yeah, and another guy that will continue to provide on the mound is the lead pitcher, the pitcher of the year for us a season ago for the defending national champions, and that's Skyler Gonzalez of Tampa, a guy who went 16-0 with a 2.46 ERA over 102 third innings, only struck out 67. But when you're 16-0 with that ERA, you're tough to beat every time you go out to the bump.
You're unbeatable. I mean, you're 16-0. Like, not once you had 7 innings of 1-run ball and you lost. Not once. And you typically don't get that with the high-powered offense that the Spartans have, our consensus #1 team in the country coming in. However, you do the math and you don't have to carry the one. He's 20-0 in his career as a pitcher at Tampa, and a 3.16 ERA in 133 innings in his career. And he's never lost a game. He's never lost a game. A returning best pitcher in the country, at least for us. He was the D2 pitcher of the year last season. And man, if he could go out through his college career, obviously he's had a couple different stops, Polk State College in West Virginia, and now for Tampa, the right-hander, man, I think that if he could put together another year without losing a ball game, you'd be looking at something that's just incredibly special for Skyler Gonzalez.
Absolutely. Incredibly special for that program, and incredibly special considering that, they're on the hunt to have the most Division II titles of all time with 10, currently at 9. But now we go to another team that's a historic program in Division II baseball, and another guy that didn't lose last year. The ERA numbers might be a little bit different, but the whip is impressive as always. Connor Wolf, Central Missouri, 12-0 last year, had a 4.05 ERA, at 4 complete games, 2 shutouts, over 97 2/3 innings. He had a whip of 1.003, so he only allowed 1 walk or hit per inning pitched, and his hits per 9 was 7.6. So a guy that can really get it done for the Mules and will continue to get it done, we feel like, for the Mules.
Yeah, when you nearly eat up 100 innings on the mound and don't lose a ball game, and do it for a team where you don't have to throw that well all the time, when you nearly break a Division II record in home runs, he still did. He threw well very often, and I know that 12-0 is impressive. And having the ERA that he did, just an eyelash above 4, one thing that's interesting is he obviously had way more innings than hits allowed and 226 batting average against, but he's been impressive throughout his career. It was his 2nd consecutive season doing great things on the mound, really 3rd consecutive. Obviously came out of the bullpen a lot as a freshman and went 5-1. He won 11 ball games in 23, 12-0 last year. He's 28-4 in his career. So if you can throw the ball and throw the ball decently for UCM, you're going to put up some records like that because of how good their offense is. But make no mistake about it, Connor Wolf really coming into this year 28-4 in his career with an ERA below 4, throwing over 200 innings in his time. You expect him to eat up a lot of innings again this season, and he really just had a couple of bad starts last year. That's why the ERA kind of was bigger than it was, but he was still dominant for this team most of the time, and a reason why we have him as a first-team All-American.
Absolutely. And now we transition now to our 3 relief pitchers, and we start with a guy who just went on an impressive postseason run for Kevin Brooks and Angelo State as they made it back to the finals for the 2nd consecutive year. And it was led by this guy who pitched really well in that opening game against Central Missouri, and that's Caleb Hewarts. In that game, Will, he went 7 in the third, 3 hits, no runs, 3 walks, and 10 strikeouts. He threw 110 pitches. That was the most that he has ever pitched in his life when he did a post-game presser on it. So very interesting to see that there on the season. He went 2-2 with a 2.29 ERA. He had 7 saves through 51 innings, struck out 69 batters, walked just 24 with a whip of 1.15. Only allowed 6.2 hits per 9 innings.
And yeah, guy hitting people hit 190 off of him. I mean, he was really 25 times he was called upon by Kevin Brooks, used quite a bit. Obviously, a versatile arm, but the kid that's from San Angelo, Texas, to put together a 2023 season when he made 15 appearances and 4 saves and won a national championship, to then have a bigger role last year coming into this season. Obviously, he's been used out of the bullpen so often, 40 appearances in his career, just 2 starts. It's going to be interesting because obviously he showed that, hey, as a starter, he can do some things sometimes. So it's going to be fun to see, obviously, toward the end of last year, how he ate up 5 innings, 7 innings. Obviously, Central Missouri was great, and then 5 more innings against Tampa. It'll be fun to see if Kevin Brooks decides to vary his role, but he's such a valuable weapon in the back end of that bullpen.
Absolutely. And speaking of valuable bullpen or valuable weapon on the back end of that bullpen, you got to go to Jake Kramer with Cal PA in the PSAC, a 1.47 ERA a year ago. And that's the follow-up, a 1.16 ERA in 2023. He had 10 saves over 20 appearances, 30 2/3 innings, struck out 26, walked 8. Didn't allow anybody to get on base. His whip was .783. Speaks volumes for the type of guy he is, and he'll definitely be one of the best back-end arms in the country.
He's absolutely just nails. I mean, 155 batting average against, and in his career, 1.33 is his ERA. When you have back-to-back years sub 1.5 ERA, like you mentioned, a 1.16 and then a 1.47, he's a 1.33 ERA in his career. That's insane. 7-1 across 37 appearances with that minuscule ERA, and opponents hitting just 187 off him, all that in 54 innings. And he has 16 career saves after getting double digits last year. A huge back-end arm. And for Cal PA, they're a guy that if they are winning toward the end of the game, you know he's going to get the ball, and he's done such a good job of it the last couple of years.
And as now we go to our final player on the first team preseason All-American list, we go to Braden Sparaco for Southern Connecticut State, a guy who went 5-4 last year, pitching 18 games, 41 2/3 innings, a little bit of a different approach here, as this guy is a multi-inning guy who gets the job done. He had 5 saves, but 41 2/3 innings over 18 appearances essentially means he throws about 3 innings per appearance. He did not have any starts, so this is all bullpen work. And he had 51 strikeouts to just 7 walks. The guy who can get it done there for the Owls, and we expect him to get it done there too as well as that big multi-inning reliever.
Yeah, I mean, it was really interesting how he, across 18 appearances, all relief appearances, 5 saves, like you mentioned, but to get over 41, nearly 42 innings in that process. But the thing that sticks out to me is just the composure he had on the mound. 51 strikeouts to 7 walks is nothing to scoff at for a freshman a year ago. I'm going to be interested to see if they maybe switch up his role because he can show he can be a multi-inning guy. Do you want to have that at the start of games? We don't know, but basing off his 2024 performance, certainly a first-team All-American in our estimation coming into this year, if he can continue that back end stuff. But going to be keeping an eye on that if he's going to maybe toe the rubber at the beginning of games now.
Absolutely. We'll for sure keep an eye on that in the 10, and you'll keep an eye on the rest of our list. I'll go through the second team and just list off the names of their school as well. If you're watching this on video, you can see it as well. And then will talk about the third team as well. And then we will talk about some guys that, weren't eligible, and then some guys that were really close on our list as we were picking through these names. But now we'll go to the second team, and we'll just go in order. Chase Heath, the catcher from Central Missouri. Jeremy Bagora, first baseman from Young Harris. Jorge Burgo, second baseman from Southern New Hampshire. Brother McCool, third baseman from Lubbock Christian. Easton Good, the shortstop from Indianapolis. Mason Andrews, one of our outfielders. Dylan Driver from Catawba. Andrews from the Colorado School of Mines. Jacob Guerrero from Angelo State and Jacob Gutierrez from Lubbock Christian. Ben Lead from Central Washington. Jake Entrikin, the designated hitter from Point Loma. Dennis Pierce, utility from East Stroudsburg. Liam Carroll from New Haven. John Luke Lanton, the starter from Georgia College. Trace Hartman, the starter from Charleston, West Virginia, the ERA champion last season. Maddox Long, starter pitcher from Harding. Payne Stoltzworth, starting pitcher from Catawba. And our three relievers are J.D. McReynolds from Central Missouri, Nelson Mercado from Arkansas Monticello, and Max Meyer from Embry-Riddle, as will take over and announce the third team selections.
Yeah, our third team starts with Jack Enrico out of Young Harris. Obviously, a couple selections for a team. And then Charleston, another guy that they have with the back, Casey Fink. Alec Boucher out of Duville at second base. And then Daniel Patterson from Westmont. Team that, hey, they're eligible this year. And they got some guys. Aiden Byrne, another NSIC shortstop, along with Jack Hines on the first team. Drew Townsend, Kirk Wolf, Carson Wright from Missouri Southern, Arkansas Monticello, and Northwestern Oklahoma, a couple of GAC outfielders. That's loaded. And then KW Kalichi from Monterey Bay, Braden Stokes out of the Great Lakes Valley Conference in UMSL. And you got Peyton Conti, who hit just for so much average last year at Cal PA. He at designated hitter. And then Ryan Williams from Northwest Missouri. And then on the mound, you got Ryan DeWeese taking over that role from one of the best pitchers in the country in Brent Francisco last year. Reginaldo Houston from Francis Marion, and then Ryan Hines out of Malloy, who's got a loaded pitching staff, and maybe some other candidates we'll get into. Chase Oberle from Ouachita Baptist, and then Cam Scott from Ashland, who has one of the best rotations in the country. And then Tim Gooden out of the league. Caden Parker out of East Stroudsburg again. You know they're loaded on the mound. And then Hayden Simerson out of Catawba. So it's going to be fun to see as we kind of talk about those second and third teams. And first team, of course, that we went into a little more detail on. But, Robert, you wanted to mention some guys that weren't eligible, some guys that were close. But obviously the thing for me that we talk about, NSIC shortstops, and then the other thing for me, and just middle infield in general, is the pitching staffs from some of these teams. East Stroudsburg's loaded. Catawba's loaded. I mean, they got a lot of candidates. And then Malloy, can't forget about them. They want to try to be the kings of the East that Southern New Hampshire has been for a long time. And, Southern New Hampshire, 3 loaded starters as well.
Absolutely. So we'll get into some names that we want maybe to consider for end of season that weren't eligible again with our criteria. And we'll start on the bat side. DJ Van Atten, if you remember, at Southern Nazarene in 2023, he had 20 doubles and 21 home runs, hit 470 in OPS above 1,400 in 2023, played at Division I Abilene Christian in 2024. Now he's back in the GAC, but this time with Oklahoma Baptist. And we'll see how he performs, as he might try to go for the home run record that was kind of going back and forth with Alex Schroeder and Troy Shields a year ago. Now both of those guys have graduated, but we'll see if DJ Van Atten can replace that power. Another guy I want to talk about is Alberto Ozuna, the transfer at Tampa, who came from North Carolina, as a guy who hit 281, 376, 537, 17 doubles, 14 home runs. We fully expect this guy to perform at the Division II level, considering he did it at North Carolina, and a very powerful bat there. But again, we played at Division I last year. That doesn't mean he can't be an end-of-season All-American. But for now, for preseason, he'll be off that list. Another guy we want to talk about is Brendan Beaver, a guy who returns to Ashland after being the GMAC Pitcher of the Year in 2023. With a 1.96 ERA over 91 2/3 innings. Went to Missouri State, pitched there in 2024. Now he's back at Ashland. So those are a couple of names that we'll highlight. But if you subscribe to our Patreon, you can see the full list of guys on there and their stats from 2024. But let's talk about some guys who made it really hard to kind of keep them off the list for this preseason All-American.
Yeah, I mean, where do you start? Because it really was a difficult thing. Obviously, like you mentioned, we had so many submissions to work with, which we were grateful for. And shout out to all the coaches that did submissions along with us pulling together names that we thought were really good. The coaches also poured in a lot of submissions. So shout out to all the coaches for that. And then we pulled together names maybe coaches didn't submit, and obviously that full comprehensive list available on our Patreon for members to see all the basically top players that you can filter by position in the country of all guys that were candidates to be All-Americans. But man, where do we really start? I think it's hard because I think we talked about how good Malloy was, Robert, and their pitching staff. And obviously, they had a couple guys that were pretty good, J.C. Kiss being one of them. But another team in that region with Austin Trempor and what Southern New Hampshire had, they have so many really good guys as well. And they've been to the World Series 4 straight times. So maybe we could start there with some of those guys. I don't really know exactly where you want to go with it, but those were where at least my mind went. It was really close on the pitching side of things.
Absolutely, it was really close. Those two names on the pitching side of things, J.C. Kiss, like you mentioned, as well. We want to mention Ashton Mychek, who was the NSIC Pitcher of the Year for Augustana. Anson Merrick at Lander, who went 5-0, who had 14 appearances, 7 starts. Again, just really hard to leave it off this list. Austin Trempor, like Will mentioned, another guy who went 11-2 with a 4 ERA and 98 2/3 innings for Southern New Hampshire, who went to Cary once again. A lot of these guys, Cody Ball as well, a proven track winner there for Drury. Connor Irvine at Arkansas Monticello, the West Florida trio of Dalton Newshander, Jacob Heath, and Cade Manderscheid. That's going to be, when you talked about earlier of like dominant rotations, that can be another dominant rotation because, again, they're very close on that list, and it's very hard to leave them off. There you got Frostburg State, Patrick Bauer at a 2.65 ERA, was 6-3 over 54 in a third innings. It's just really hard to leave some of these guys off, especially starting base. And then third base, we had so many loaded guys. I mean, you have guys like Abay Medina at Texas A&M International hit 405. Really hard to leave him off. Dylan Coleman, what he did in the postseason with Delta State in 398, slugged to almost 700. Then you have a guy who now was ineligible, but do want to shout him out for being, the CCAC Player of the Year in the NAIA and now Division II program, Roosevelt, Kikoa Ogawa, who hit 421 and slugged 679. Very interesting there as well. Will Doherty for Missouri Southern, 384. Really hard to leave him off. Caston Harvey, who hit 354 and also stole 17 bases. Jacob Steele, from Central Missouri. Another guy that was really hard to lead off. Cash J as well. We mentioned him earlier. These guys makes it very, very hard to leave off, especially with just that loaded amount of talent here in Division II baseball. Lance Barnett at Cameron, who hit 378 and slugged 724 with 20 doubles. Hard to leave him off, but another guy we should highlight and watch out for. And there's so many more. If you want to see, again, the full list, Patreon, subscribe to it. You'll get so much more content as the season goes along as well, and you'll be introduced to our season-long pick'em, where you get prizes if you end up winning that throughout the season as we pick out some, games of the week, and then you can pick the winners from there.
Absolutely. A lot of good things to watch. MIAA seems to be loaded. The GAC outfield looks to be nasty. And, of course, the PSAC. We're high on that group, obviously, with 7 All-Americans in total and, of course, 5 teams in our rankings. So thanks again for everybody tuning in. Of course, if you do want to watch our video on rankings and you're more excited about more players, we do talk about the top 25 teams. We mention a lot of these guys, but we also mention some of the key transfers that these top 25 teams had, which may give you an idea of some of the new faces along with the returners that are for these teams, with some of the coaches and what they did in the transfer portal. Of course, some that we did mention, but some that we didn't because perhaps they weren't eligible, but all, of course, look to be some of those key guys that are coming into the portal. So again, we're close to the season, and we appreciate all your guys' support.